that at least half, if not all of this article was absolutely engineered inside of Burbank, California at Disney's PR department to put this on the headline to make you forget what you saw earlier on X, make you forget the public statement from Nexstar, make you forget what you saw from Sinclair, make you forget what real Red America did tonight. No, they're going to make you think this was personally Donald Trump's decision to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel tonight. Here comes the Hollywood Disney engineered interference. This is what's at the top of the marquee right now on Deadline. FCC chairman Brendan Carr, who threatened ABC over Jimmy Kimmel comments, once rallied against policing speech, quote, in the name of the public interest. Again, I don't even want to read this article because I don't honestly give a shit what it says, because we have already established factually in 3 hours of broadcasting the show tonight and at 45 minutes at least on the regular Valiant Renegade channel earlier when this story broke, that all of this Brendan Carr stuff, everybody out there in Renegade Nation, ignore this shit. It had nothing to do, literally nothing to do with the decision that Disney made to end Jimmy Kimmel tonight. That decision was made at the grassroots level and pushed up. Again, I can't say it enough, to Sinclair and Nexstar. Sinclair is the single biggest affiliate ABC partner that Disney has, bar none. Like, there's not a close second. Nexstar is, I think, the second, but Sinclair is way bigger than Nexstar. This decision was made at a grassroots level, but Disney has already decided that they are going to deflect and they're going to gaslight you in America into thinking that this was a Trump person that forced them into this corner, as opposed to the free market that said, piss on Jimmy Kimmel. And here's an article at the top of the page, Deadline, right now, that they put together, right? And I'm sure, I bet you money that at least half, if not all of this article was absolutely engineered inside of Burbank, California at Disney's PR department to put this on the headline to make you forget what you saw earlier on X, make you forget the public statement from Nexstar, make you forget what you saw from Sinclair, make you forget what real Red America did tonight. No, they're going to make you think this was one guy at the FCC that scared Disney and Disney had to comply. Right? This wasn't Real America that made this. Real America, no. They love Jimmy Kimmel. This was personally Donald Trump's decision to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel tonight. This is what Disney wants you to believe. This right here is the gaslighting going on.
Well, not only that, the tweets that they're referencing, because they're already up on social media, of course they are. They're so used to pulling old tweets to get people canceled. We've seen it done in the past. They're so used to that. The tweets and all the comments that he made in the past, he's talking about political satire. That's not what Jimmy Kimmel did. No. He's referencing political satire. That's what he's talking about. That's what he's talking about when he's talking about policing speech in the name of the public interest. He's talking about political satire.
No, look, Steph, political satire, I think most people, you and I, and probably everybody in this audience would agree, political satire is what we all used to sit down and, crack up at. Now, you're clearly too young to have seen this when it premiered, but I mean, like the OG days of Saturday Night Live. I'm talking about, now I wasn't young enough to see the first few seasons. I was born in 79, but I can tell you, I remember reruns into the 80s. I'm talking about the days when Steve Martin, Chevy Chase, and these guys, Eddie Murphy got a start on Saturday Night Live. I'm talking about the old school days, like when they would do jokes based on whoever the president was at the time. Chevy Chase. Yeah, Chevy Chase used to do a bit when SNL started. Chevy Chase was doing a Gerald Ford bit on SNL. It was funny. It was political satire. right? It
Yep.
was not in any way mean-spirited. It wasn't hateful. They were just doing comedy, and everybody read it as comedy. But nowadays, you look at modern comedians, not all of them, but unfortunately most of them, and it is vicious, it's vile, it's mean-spirited. And modern comedians out there, including Jimmy Kimmel, think it's perfectly acceptable and hilarious to talk about, you know, so and so's a Nazi. And they're not
Yeah.
joking. They actually mean it. Right. And they talk about, I mean, it's a different era. It's not like it was before. So
Yeah, he's deceiving his audience, and that's pretty much all he's done. He's just been a political propagandist. But what he did during his opening statement, that's not political satire. When I think of political satire, I go straight to Saturday Night Live. You know, that's where I go.
yeah,
That's where my mind goes to. Is
OG
when
political
they yeah
satire.
when they make fun of the presidents, they do all of that. Like that's political satire. It's not what Jimmy
Yeah.
Kimmel was doing at
And
all.
I remember growing up, I mean, they made fun of like Dana Carvey back in the late 80s and early 90s when Dana Carvey was the guy that was tapped on SNL to play George Bush, like George Bush Sr. that succeeded Reagan. He was funny as shit. And even if you were a fan of Bush or not a fan of Bush, you couldn't help yourself. You had to laugh at Dana Carvey doing it because it was so funny. And then I forget who it was. They had a couple of guys, I think, over the years play Clinton. And, I wasn't a Clinton fan and politically would disagree with him. But I mean, I laughed. I never thought like SNL was doing anything that was like vicious against Clinton. They were just being funny. And then it was George H.W. Bush and so on. But I mean, after you got into the 2000s, and especially once Barack Obama came along, you kind of got that new generation. You got that millennial and the generation which had a different attitude than us Gen Xers. And Gen Xers we'd make fun of everything. We were just cool about everything. But then it became vicious. And now you're in the modern era, and it's like, it's just so vicious. And it's incredibly one-sided. Republicans are Nazis and all this kind of, and then things like ABC and CBS, Stephen Colbert, and all this. And there were comments earlier, Steph, we were talking about this. It's, I've never been a huge Jimmy Fallon fan. I've never found Jimmy Fallon that funny. Even when he was on SNL, I thought he was kind of obnoxious and annoying. I just didn't think he was that good. But I will say this. Comcast, NBC, I don't know if Jimmy Fallon is really like this or this is, pressure from corporate above. But Jimmy Fallon has been relatively pragmatic in his comedy. He's not really jumped into hardline leftism that I've seen. Maybe he has, but I mean, I don't pay attention that much. But I always hear stuff about Jimmy Kimmel. I always hear stuff about Stephen Colbert. I never really hear anything about Jimmy Fallon.
Well, Jimmy Fallon went through his own sort of, I guess, cancellation during COVID when people in his office
I
started
remember that.
complaining about like how rude he was. He had a problem with alcoholism, and he basically did like went through sort of like an Ellen DeGeneres thing. He was a funny
Yeah.
man on camera and a terrible person to his employees and to the people that worked with him. So he went through his own sort of cancellation by his own employees. Since then, I'm not too sure. I think all of Jimmy Fallon's stuff sort of happens, or the things that he will say happen like in his opening monologue. I don't think that he goes as hard as Jimmy Kimmel or as Stephen Colbert. He does not go that hard. But the
Yeah.
things that he does say, he says in his opening monologue, which
Mhm.
aren't really that which aren't really that long. But you know what's interesting about Jimmy Kimmel? Jimmy Kimmel,
Mhm.
and you can find this on YouTube.
Mhm.
Jimmy Kimmel, after George Floyd happened and the riots and all of that, he gave an 8 minutes opening monologue talking about the senseless death of George Floyd, or the unfair death of George Floyd. And that's really interesting. He gave 8 minutes to honor George Floyd, and he couldn't even be bothered to talk about Charlie Kirk for more than a couple of minutes. Just make fun of it, make light of it.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And again, I'm not trying to sit here and suggest that, Jimmy Fallon is MAGA. He's not, obviously, or that he's
No.
absolved already. But I found, whereas guys like Kimmel and Colbert would go out of their way to insult middle America.
Yeah.
Like Fallon, you could tell Fallon had a proclivity to the left versus the right, but I don't remember any instance where Fallon went out of his way to insult middle America like the other guys a lot of times did. And I keep wondering if that wasn't a matrix of what like Comcast Universal had put in place. I'd like to think it is, because again, I think Comcast overall, NBC Universal is although not perfect by any stretch, but a far more pragmatic and far wiser operation than Disney for sure when it comes to that kind of stuff. But hey, maybe that's just me. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.